We're waiting on some, is this on? Is this on? Oh, we are going to be live streamed, right? Okay. Okay. Well, we want to go ahead and, while he's bringing it up, we can just kind of get started. Okay. Okay. Well, good evening. Thank you for being here, and welcome on behalf of the City of Durant. We're here this evening in a town hall meeting scenario, and we want to welcome all of you that are here, and hope we can provide maybe answers to any questions you might have, and the city manager is going to be providing the information on both Proposition 1 and Proposition 2. I can tell you that we'll have another town hall meeting here at the library June the 19th, same time. So we'll look forward to that event too, and of course the election's on June the 26th for a Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, a street construction, reconstruction, and repair GO bond issue, and a capital improvement sales tax proposition also. But before we begin, if you wouldn't mind, we always like to open with a word of prayer, so just remain seated. And Father in heaven, thank you for this day, and Father, thank you for our country and for this opportunity, Father, together as free people. We thank you for that. We thank you for the men and women that provide that opportunity, Father, that are serving every day, both here at home and abroad. And we pray for your protection over those folks. Thank you for every good thing. Father, forgive us when we do wrong and when we've done wrong. Help us to be good people. And be with us tonight, and help us be of an open mind and receive the information provided, and we'll thank you for that. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Just right now, we'll bring the city manager up, Tim Rundle, and Tim, the floor is yours. And thanks for being here again.
Thanks, sir. Yes, on behalf of the staff at City Hall, we thank you all for coming out tonight, for which we think is a pretty important meeting in which we're going to be discussing a couple of propositions. As the mayor had stated, we have Proposition 1 and Proposition 2, and we're going to go ahead and get started tonight and with a real quick PowerPoint presentation. I promise I'm not going to bore you with too many slides, and then it will probably answer some of the questions you might currently have. We've also left some brochures in your chairs that have all the pertinent information. Are we good? Just the one? Can you hear me? Oh, I think it just went off. I think it just, Marie, did you hit something? All right. Test. There we go. Sorry about that. So, saying this, we're going to have a quick PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to open the floor up to Mr. Chris Gander with BOSC, and he's going to talk a little bit more in regards to the bond and how bonds work, because it's something new to our community and new to our city, and I think it's something that is important enough for you to be able to have the questions and have an expert here that can answer those questions for you. Again, as the mayor said, this is the first of 2 town hall meetings. We are live streaming right now on our Facebook channel, and we'll put it on our YouTube channel as well for folks to be able to come back and watch at a later date if they weren't able to be here. We feel like it's very important to be transparent and have these meetings live streamed to our constituents so they make informed decisions. So at this time, I'm going to start a PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to go ahead and turn the, I hate to do this, but we're just going to kind of dim the lights a little bit so you can see the slides a little bit better here. And at first, I'm just going to do quickly a quick background on our sales tax. A lot of people, all right, it's like I'm at a Thunder game and we just won. The sales tax breakdown for the city of Durant, and some of you are well aware of this, it's currently 9.375. And what does that mean for us? That means the state gets 4.5%, Bryan County sales tax, they get 0.5%, then the other 4.375 comes to the city. And again, this kind of is a breakdown as far as what all piece of the pie is here. The breakdown with the cities. Now, I think this is crucial because I think a lot of folks look at it and saying, well, you have 4.375, that creates quite a bit of revenue. Why can't you just use that to fix the streets? And I'm going to explain why. When you look down at the breakdown of our current tax, the 4.375, I get 2 cents for the general operating fund. That means that money is not earmarked for anything. It goes right into the general fund to help pay for salaries and operations and those type of things. The next we're going to talk about a little bit tonight is that 1 penny capital improvement project sales tax fund. That has been here, by the way, since 1978. The voters passed that in 1978, and it's been renewed and extended multiple times. And I'll explain a little bit about our proposition and what we're asking the voters to consider. We also have a 1/4 penny. It's the Economic Development Fund that goes to the DIA to do some recruiting for industry within our community. We have a 1/4 penny that goes to the sports complex. Years back, we had that. And by the way, this sunsets, which means it expires in 2021, the capital improvement project sales tax does. The 1/4 penny for the economic development, there is no sunset on that. The sports complex, which is a 1/4 penny, that comes off in 2024. And the college, the Southeastern, gets a 1/4 penny. They did several upgrades with theirs, building the new arena and some upgrades to their facilities. That also expires in 2024 as well. And then we have 5/8 of a penny goes toward our education fund. That's when the voters came and approved. And by the way, all of these were voter approved. This is not something the city just created. The voters have approved all these, including the 5/8 education fund. That is a 5/8 of a penny that goes to pay for the new high school. Years ago, the school district came to the council and requested that this be put on the ballot to offset some of the debt service on building the new high school. The council agreed to do so. And this comes off, I believe, in 2032. So that's kind of a quick breakdown of our sales tax here. Looking at the numbers real quick, and I won't harp on this too much because my staff is tired of hearing me say this, but when it comes to the actual numbers here as far as sales tax goes, when you take a look at the numbers, Oklahoma is the only state in the country where the cities primarily depend on sales tax and sales tax revenue to run their cities. If you look at the U.S. municipal revenue on average, most cities get some federal funds for about 3%, state about 12%. I won't bore you with all these other, and some states, the cities actually get a portion of your income tax that comes back to the city to help pay for it. And as you can see, on average, the most cities in the United States, sales tax makes up about 15% of their budget, of their revenue. And if you look over here, this is the average city in the United States. They get about 32% runoff of property taxes. Look at Oklahoma, 61% generally on the average is what we run our cities on, that revenue. And then when you break it down, it's typically about 20% in service. That means the stuff that we provide services to. And then again, like I say, it kind of breaks down state and other government. We do make some money off of licenses and franchise tax. Franchise tax being your utilities, the natural gas, the electric, the providers of the gas, electric, and the cable company. In order to use our utility easements, they pay a franchise tax back to us. So that is some revenue that we do get back from the city. And how does this affect us? Well, there's no big secret right now. Anybody buy stuff from Amazon? I do. I mean, I'll admit there's times where I cannot find what I need here, and I need it quickly, and it's either go to Sherman or McKinney, don't kill me for saying that, and go buy it there, or buy it on Amazon and get it as a Prime member the next day. Again, I buy very little, but when I do need something quickly, this is what I need. A couple years ago, we had a Mardi Gras theme at the chamber banquet, I think it was. I didn't have a tie that went with it. I looked on Amazon, I found a green, glittery Mardi Gras looking tie, paid $8 for it. It was at my house the next day, and it was free shipping. So it's hard to just go out and do those things. It's a convenience factor, and we're all utilizing that. So saying that, internet sales are skyrocketing. We did have a law passed starting in March of 2017. We did start collecting sales tax from Amazon, but I will tell you, there are some loopholes within that. It's only what you buy from Amazon, not from other folks they have the option to opt out on whether or not to collect the sales tax. So we found out real quickly. We were really excited because we thought at City Hall, we're finally going to start capturing some of the revenue that's leaving via the internet. It's a very small portion, very, very small portion. But most cities, if you talk to here in Oklahoma, that's what we're struggling with right now. We're struggling with trying to find ways to fund projects, and we're fighting against internet sales. And being a city manager in the metro area, I was an assistant city manager in Yukon and assistant city manager in Midwest City. I can tell you firsthand, cities are constantly fighting and blocking other cities from getting retail development because that's how fierce it is. The city of Midwest City, they bought a mobile home park that was actually in Oklahoma City across from I-40. And the reason why they did that is because they had heard a developer was going to come in there right across the street and put this huge development and we were going to take a real hit on that. So it's crazy that a city has to go buy a mobile home park to block development from another city in order to get that. But they were going to buy it, bulldoze it, and put this big development there, and it was going to have an adverse effect on our city. We shouldn't have to worry about stuff like that. But unfortunately, that's what we do. Another big factor that people don't consider is exemptions. There's a lot of sales tax exemptions right now. Back in 1980, there were approximately 10 exemptions in the state. Right now, there's 150. That was in 2015, so it's gone up, I'm sure, the last 3 years, to the tune of about $7.2 billion in exemptions. And what that does to the city, too, our legislators, and people get onto us as city officials when we go to the Capitol, and we beg and plead with our legislators to quit giving out all these exemptions, because what it does, it's good for the consumer, I admit that, but it has an adverse effect on the city. And when you have $7.2 billion in our state in exemptions from sales tax, that does have an adverse effect on how we can operate and run our city efficiently. So here we go, and I'll go through this real quick. Some of you have seen this before, and this is actually from last year's budget, but a 1 cent sales tax for capital improvement, that brings in approximately about $3.7 million. But 100% of the CIP revenue is committed to long-term debt service. Over the past 10 or 12 years, the city has made some great strides for our police, our fire department, our water, sewer, a lot of investments back into our community. In order to get those done, they took out loans to be able to pay for the debt service. So when we get that $3.6 million, it's just simply right now a pass-through to pay the debt service for all the long-term debt that we have right now to pay those loans off. The sales tax for the sports complex, it brings in approximately $908,000, and right now we can't use any of that for our infrastructure needs because it has to be paid off to pay off the sports complex. The same thing with the Southeastern's quarter penny. We cannot use any of that for our infrastructure needs. The 5/8 penny, right now that thing is bringing in approximately $3.2 million. 100% of that goes to debt service to pay for the school bond debt. The 5% lodging and tourism. I've heard people say, well, that's a new thing that the citizens passed in April of 2017, a 5% lodging tax that's spread out. And some folks ask me, is the Choctaw, is the resort exempt from this? And yes, they are. It's because they're a sovereign nation. They collect their own lodging tax. So our others do collect it. It's going to bring in approximately $500,000 a year. However, all the revenue is earmarked for promotion and tourism here in Durant, and they have an authority that oversees all of that. Okay, here's talking about the 1 penny and the Proposition 1. And what Proposition 1 does, real quickly, it removes the sunset. This is going to sunset in 2021, in 3 years. We had a retreat last year, and one of the council members started talking about, well, what if we go back to a vote to extend it? And one of the council members said, well, what if we just removed it like some of the other sales tax that are earmarked? And so that's what was proposed at that time, because I believe one of the council members asked me, Tim, do you ever see a time in our future where you're never going to need money for capital improvement? And I said, I've been doing this for nearly 20 years, and I can never see a time where a city won't need, that kind of money to help offset the cost of, because that money can only be used for capital, cannot be used for operations. So it can be, that money can be utilized to pay for our, water, sewer, some streets. It can also be utilized for buying, new fire trucks and other capital needs. Like I said, some of the things that are very important to us. So the 1 penny that was proposed is that we remove the sunset, so we don't have to continue to go back to the voters time and time again in order to ask for them to extend it one time after another. And the other thing that's really important, about 2 weeks after I took this job in October of 2016, my finance director came to me and she said, I just need to show you something that's pretty important. And so she showed me a spreadsheet. And she said, if the CIP goes away in 2021, we still owe about $12.4 million in debt service on these projects. And I was like, okay, well, what are you saying? She said, that money goes away, and you still have $12.4 million. And in 2022, as you see up here, we still have about $1.8 million a year in debt service. And this graph, I just wanted to kind of show you. Remember we talked about the 2% for the operating? So that brings in about $7.2, $7.3 million a year. That's money that's non-earmarked that we can put into the operations side of things. But if you look over here, just my public safety expenditures, that's fire, that's police, that's emergency management, dispatch, the fine folks that keep us protected. This costs me nearly about $9 million a year to run those departments. So I start every year 1.6 million in the hole when it comes to talking about the 2% operating sales tax. So think of it this way. If the thing sunsets, if the capital improvement tax sunsets in 2021, my first loan payment is 1.8 million, then I'm starting 3.4 million in the hole, right off the bat. So that's something that is going to be crucial for us, because if we lose that funding source, my total general fund budget is about $16 million a year. So if I've got to come up and find $2 million a year to carve out of my budget in order to make the debt service, it's going to mean some serious cuts. And office supplies and travel and training is not going to get us there. It's going to have to be probably in the form of some departmental cuts, possibly personnel. We have, and that's something I'm not throwing out there as like any sort of, I don't want to say a threat, but something that, but it's reality, you guys, and that's what I'm trying to deal with. It's reality, and that's what we got to deal with. If you have a $16 million budget and somebody comes up to you and says you need to carve $2 million out of it, you're going to be doing some pretty deep cuts. So that's where we are on the capital improvement. The other thing that everybody needs to understand is our revenue source coming from water, sewer, our sanitation. It brings in quite a bit of revenue for us. This last budget year, we calculated that we thought it was going to bring somewhere around $13.5 million. We transfer out $5.2 million. And what does that mean? Well, that means that when we're transferring out $5.2 million to help offset, remember I was telling you about all those other costs that we have to do to run the city, a big chunk of it comes from our utility authority. And what does that mean to you as citizens? That means the money that runs our utilities is not being put back into the infrastructure. It's being to offset the services that we have to provide to the citizens here in Durant. And there's some things in my staff, I've told them right off the bat, we're going to do everything in our power to try to, that number right there, that 5.2 million, we need to reduce that as much as we can. And there's some transfers out, but the most, there was some discussion recently on the Durant Industrial Authority. We were sending close to about $450,000, $500,000 a year to the authority to help run the operations of the authority, because they do get that quarter penny, close to $900,000, $1 million a year. However, the way the ordinance was written, they are not allowed to utilize any of that money for operations. That's just the way it was written. It has to be used for job creation only. So that's where that funding goes toward. We also send out close to $400,000 to $500,000 a year to our sports complex for operations out there. We've got a beautiful facility. We are looking at different avenues of trying to help promote and get that thing utilized more often. I get a lot of phone calls of folks wanting us to do something to get folks here. We've talked to different entities within the area, and we're working diligently on doing that. I know there's been some discussion. We had a group come here from Florida, the sports facility management group that came in and did a study showing that we're not nearly hitting our mark as where we could be as far as bringing in the number of tournaments and revenue here in town. However, we're already sending over about, like I say, 400,000 to 500,000. In order for us to achieve what they're wanting us to achieve, it's going to take a considerable amount more money for us to invest back into it. So it's going to be something, marketing and those type of things just don't come easily. You don't just put an ad on Facebook or something and get tons of tournaments and those type of things. You got to have somebody hitting the streets and knows what they're doing as far as, because it's a sports and entertainment business. Okay, this is something I wanted to kind of show. I get a lot of, and in fact, when we started this process, it's been kind of educating for me and for others. I've had people come up to me and say, well, I pay my property taxes. Why aren't you putting those back in the street where they belong? Well, if you live out in the county, yeah, there's a portion of that is being put back into the county roads, but nothing here into the city. And so what I wanted to do is kind of show you a quick math thing that I did over the last couple of days that was kind of eye-opening for me as well. Because I said earlier in the presentation, several cities get a chunk of your ad valorem in other states. We're not one of them. Oklahoma does not provide ad valorem to our cities. So what I did was I went on the Grayson County website and I looked at the city of Sherman and I pulled up, let's just put a $200,000 house into the estimator here. So I put in the county, the school district of Sherman, and the city district as the city of Sherman. Now, mind you, there were several different other selections for special districts which would even add more to the bill. I didn't select any of those. I just wanted to find out when you paid your property taxes in Sherman for a $200,000 house, what goes to the county, the school district, and the city. And as you can see right here, it's kind of hard to see, but it's about $4,100 a year is what you'd be paying on a $200,000 house. $2,500 a year goes to the school district, the county gets $735, and the city of Sherman gets $854. So I put that, mind you, $854, and that's what goes to the city to help run their operations. So now we go to Bryan County, and forgive my writing on some of this, but our property taxes here in Bryan County on a $200,000 house, essentially the breakdown is right there. As you can see, it's $1,964 is what you'd be paying for the same house. Now I won't get into all the semantics of, but they don't have income tax. We do. As I showed you earlier, we don't get anything for income tax, which I understand. But I think if we actually put a pencil to it, their overall tax burden is significantly higher than ours in Texas. And if you break down this, the school district here in Durant would get $1,279 of the $1,964. The VOTEC gets about $235. EMS gets, Bryan County EMS gets $117. The county gets $235. The health department gets $98. And the city of Durant gets a big fat goose egg. We don't get anything from your property tax. And I've had several people come up and try to debate and argue with me that they do pay their property tax, which I believe them. But believe it or not, none of that comes to the city. It all goes back for these other entities, these other 5 entities that get that. So that's, kind of in a nutshell when the argument about the property taxes come up. And we're going to talk a little bit about if Proposition 2 passes, what we'd be looking at. And by the way, I just wanted to let everybody know, Proposition 2 is, we're not reinventing the wheel here. And I kind of threw up a couple of things, Sand Springs, the village in Oklahoma City, the city of Oklahoma City, Moore, Bartlesville, Norman. Our state has kind of forced cities' hands at having to go out and look for other ways to raise revenue to pay for infrastructure needs. And I realize this community is one that's, I don't believe, ever had a GO bond come up before for a vote. but they're becoming more and more popular. I believe the city of Sand Springs passed 6 GO bonds last year, and for different projects, because they've gone out and decided. I mean, it's as I showed you earlier in the slides, we have a limited amount of revenue and resources that we can do. And I know there's always going to be the argument of, well, if you get an audit, we'll find the money. I can assure you, you're not going to find $20 million sitting in an account at City Hall. If there was, I would use it to go out and fix the streets, because I get tired of getting yelled at about the poor condition of our streets here. And one of the things, as you saw in the brochure in front of you, we did a community survey. Did some of you get the survey in the mail? Some of you. It was a random survey. A couple of you did. We sent out 2,000 surveys. We had a company called ETC. That's what they do. They sent out a survey to 2,000 randomly selected households here in Durant. Within 2 weeks, they received 508 responses, which was very quick, very high, because we were shooting for 400 to make the scientific ratio as what we needed to quantify it as random. 88% of the citizens that answered this said that they were dissatisfied with the conditions of our street. And I talked to the Rotary Club earlier today, and I think 1% said they were very satisfied with the condition of our streets. But 88% said they were dissatisfied. I'm dissatisfied. I tell people all the time, I had a family member come a couple weeks ago to come visit. And he came in, and he knows what I do. And the first thing he said to me is, "Your roads really stink here." And I said, "Yeah, thank you, welcome, come on in." So that was his first comment to me. And I was not solicited. I didn't ask him, "What do you think about the roads here in Durant?" He was very vocal, and he told me immediately what he thought of the roads. So those are the type of things, in order for us to go out and be successful in recruiting any. Again, as I said earlier, the state has forced us into fighting for every retail dollar that we can get. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear me harp on that, but that's a fact. That's what we have to do. So for us to make it appealing for folks who want to come put a business in here, either locally or nationally or regionally, we have to have decent streets. We have to have that. If we don't have good roads and good infrastructure, it makes it very difficult to recruit those folks. Because believe it or not, sometimes we've had people fly in at our airport, get picked up, or get a rental car and drive this area and fly right back out and go back wherever their corporate offices are located at. And you only get one first impression. And if their first impression was nearly blowing out their tire on Main Street, that's not a good first impression. If their impression was looking at a piece of property on Radio Road, that's not a good first impression. So those are the type of things that we need to, as a community, take a look at. And I know there's been several different ideas thrown around about ways to do this. We just sharpen the pencil and audits and this, that. We're going to find the money. It comes down to it. It's revenue, and it's paying for these streets. And there was a street committee in 2001. There was a street committee in 2009. I've talked to some of the folks that have been on those committees. They had great ideas, great plans, great vision, and for the most part, they were still talking about these same exact streets as needing to be repaired. So that tells me right there, they found the problems. We had, the roads were not in good shape. The solution is revenue, is to find a revenue source. And I know there's been some discussions about redirecting sales tax. You cannot redirect sales tax. Sales tax, when it's voted on by the people, you can't, as I said before on the capital improvement, when the voters voted back in, I believe it was 2001 was the last time they extended the CIP sales tax, we as an entity would get in huge trouble if we used that money for operations, because the sales tax was dedicated for capital improvements, not for salaries. Same thing with the quarter penny with the sports complex, the quarter penny that goes to the school. We cannot just willy-nilly redirect those monies to another way. It's illegal. We can't do that. The issue is finding the revenue to do this. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel. The proposal staff made to the council, and it was approved. And by the way, it was approved for the voters to decide. not for the council to decide, but for you guys to decide as a community on the priorities and whether or not you think that this is an acceptable way of raising the revenue. I wish my city engineer, unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but he'll be the first one to tell you because that's what he does for a living. Brandon will tell you that the cost of building streets and just infrastructure in general is on average rising about 5% a year. That includes concrete, steel, labor, all the things that are included. So the way I look at it as a city manager, as the administrator of this organization, is not, oh, well, 20 million. I look at it as from a standpoint of, well, 20 million. Every year we defer maintenance on our streets. That costs another $1 million. If these had been done, 15 years ago or so, we would be talking about a lot less money as far as the needs go here. But again, this is where we're at. I can't go back, and the mayor and I have talked about this several times. We can't go back and change decisions that were made years ago. As far as the things that were done, I can tell you as a community, over the past 10 years, I've made some vast improvements in our public safety. We've made vast improvements in some of our water and sewer distribution systems. So these are things that we can't go back in time and change that. But what we can do is figure out a solution to where we're at now. And we looked at multiple ways of revenue. And I think at this time, like I said, 2001, 2009, those committees came out and they pretty much said the same thing as what I'm telling you here in 2018. It's at some point we can have committees and subcommittees and try to stretch this out for 6 months, another year. I guarantee you when it's all said and done, they're going to come back and say, yeah, we need to fix our streets. And they're going to have to figure out a way to raise the revenue. If that sales tax for the sports complex and the school sunset in 2024, it pays off those that debt service for the sports complex and the school in 2024, our sales tax will drop a half a penny. So we'll be below 9%, which we haven't been below in quite a while. So that makes it, as a city manager, a little bit more enticing for possibly some retailers to come here, because it's harder for a retailer to come to a community when their sales tax is over 10%, 11%. They're going to go, holy cow, that's a deterrent for some people. It will turn some shoppers away and send them on down the road for someplace else where they can save money. And that's something I think we had to take a good, strong look at too. So with that, I think I'm going to call up Chris Gander, and Chris can kind of go over the bond side of this. And again, before Chris comes up, I'll just real quickly, I will tell you, and I'll take this. Sorry, Byron, I'm going off key. The 4 major streets that we looked at that needed the most repair, and again, these are the same 4 streets from years ago, was Main Street, all the way from the railroad tracks to 21st Street. That's a major reconstruction. That's not just a simple mill and overlay. That's going to be that big stretch, I believe, from 9th Street all the way to 15th or 16th Street. I don't have my glasses on. That's all going to be completely ripped out and reconstructed. That's going to be all the drainage and all those issues that we're having there. We're looking at getting that water away from there, because water causes damage. That's what water damages streets, as well as ice and other things. And we're going to be, like I said, doing some major reconstruction as well, down from 9th down to Katy Lane, I think it is, where the railroad tracks is. That's going to be an undertaking itself, but it's not going to be a complete tear out like we're going to do in that section of it. We're going to have the, because we're very cognizant of our business owners in downtown, and we don't want to hinder their business, so there's going to be a lot. And if Brandon was here, he could explain to you about a lot of traffic control issues and things, doing one lane at a time and having, it's going to be a pain. If this thing happens, with this kind of progress comes pain. But I can tell you this, as being a part of some pretty substantial projects in Yukon and Midwest City and in Auburn too, people forget about it though once that street is brand new, and they love it, and they forget about the pain really quick because they realize the payoff. The other one is, and this is all in the brochure there, is from Washington, from Main Street north to University. Oh, I'm over here. North to University. There's some plans, if that happens, to put in sidewalks pretty much from Main Street to the University. Sidewalks is something that this city desperately needs. We have a lot of pedestrian traffic in here. We want to be a pedestrian-friendly community where people, as you can see, especially in this area here, there's a lot of people that do a lot of walking, which is good. I think it's good. It's healthy, get people out, and also it offers a safe route for our citizens to be able to go from A to B without having to worry about getting ran over. University from West Side all the way to Gates. That's going to be 3-laned all the way with turning lanes. That's going to be a vast improvement and help with the congestion there. One of the things that got brought up today is off of University Place, there'll be turning lanes there. So if you're like me, off of University and University Place, when you're turning to go south toward Walmart, that can be a very dangerous intersection. And we're going to put some turning lanes in there for that to be a better. I try to avoid that intersection at all costs. I even go all the way down to 70 just to avoid it because I've seen so many near misses there. And then that's going to extend all the way out to 49th Street. There's going to be a ton of improvement on that intersection of 49th and University for the drainage. And last but not least, there's going to be some vast improvements from Main Street north to Shamrock Street there on Radio Road. That's another one that we get a lot of complaints about. Now those projects, it's an expensive endeavor. It's about $14 million to do those projects, and that includes, I think, about 1.8 in contingency money. The remaining $6 million is what I'm really excited about. It's going to go toward rehabbing and repairing a significant amount of streets here in Durant. We're talking about 400 to 500 blocks of streets. What we're going to plan on doing is hiring a company. They come in and they do a laser test. They've got all these contraptions that it sounds like a little trailer, and it follows behind a truck, and they test the grade and the drivability and all the surface. And what it's going to do is rank for us pretty much the 500 worst streets here or blocks here in town for us to look at as far as doing some sort of mill and overlay. A simple, last summer, we did Evergreen from 16th to 19th Street. If you've been on that, that's an example of what our crews can do in a pretty quick time. We will also have, now these other projects, we're going to have to bid them out. We don't have the manpower or the construction abilities to do those major streets, but this we can do. This is something that we can do. With that $6 million is going to approximately 400 to 500 blocks of street repair, which is about a third of our streets here in town. I think that's going to be significant. That's really going to help us. Again, with some of the areas and residential areas, it was discussed, some cities have gone to council members and they'll say, give us the list of the worst streets in your ward. And that becomes very dicey, I think. And our council said, no, we don't want to do that. We want, go out and find, and it's not a real expensive study. I mean, I say real expensive, $20,000 to $25,000, but it's money well spent because it gives us an overlay report that shows us, like I said, the 400 to 500 worst streets in the area for us to look at improving. So, but there's been a lot of question of what was going to happen with that extra $6 million. There's rumors rampant about, it's a slush fund. It's going to go toward it can't. It has to go toward street improvements. 70% of the bond, and I'm still a little bit of Chris's thunder, the $20 million has to be earmarked exactly as to what we're going to do, and we've done that with those major street projects. This allows us the flexibility to go out and do others, but it has to be used on street repairs. It cannot be utilized for anything else. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Gander, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about general obligation bonds, and he'll be happy to answer your questions here in a minute.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm Chris Gander with Bank of Oklahoma Securities. Kind of thought I was here just to answer questions, but I think we'll do a little education. This is a presentation we had given to the City Council, and Tim did a really good job. Kind of what I was going to talk about is, explaining the limited revenue sources that cities have. So to me, there's three real sources. It's sales tax, property tax, or utility system revenue, so water and sewer rates. And that's it. You don't have a whole lot of choices. Once again, Tim did a good job. It's like sales tax is either dedicated or already spent. So it's either property tax or water system rates if you want the streets improved. So all of those options were looked at, and ultimately this is a plan that's where it's left to the voters of the city to determine whether they want the roads fixed or not. And if they do, they vote yes, and the taxes are applied pro rata to each person's house based on the value. And so we'll get into that.
You're going to point it this way.
The middle one?
No, there's one on the right. Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to have to talk a little bit closer.
Okay, get this a little closer. I'll kind of do what Tim did. So I'll try not to go too fast. If anybody has any questions, just holler out or raise your hand. Breakdown, and maybe I should start at a high level. So general obligation bonds are very regulated. The way we issue them, it's all through state statutes and how we issue them. We go through a competitive process. If the vote passes, we will issue bonds in series. The plan is to issue $4 million a year for the next 5 years for a total of $20 million. We will come in front of City Council, lay out where the bonds had been sold the previous year, show how that has affected the tax rates, and then show what the new bond is projected to do, get authorization for one of those bond issues, and then issue that bond issue for that year, and then come back to the same process. So the plan would be to issue a portion of the $20 million each year for the next 5 years. So the way that also works is there's a levy, which is basically the tax rate, and that is multiplied by the value of the property. So somebody that has $1 million home will pay 10 times as much as somebody that has a $100,000 home. So everybody pays their share of the debt service as it relates to the bonds. I think the other key point is, as it relates to ad valorem tax in the statutes, there's no way to vote in a operational tax levy where you can just take a 5 mil or 10 mil. The only way for a city to raise property tax revenue is to actually go out and have a capital project, issue debt, and then that debt service payment dictates the tax rate. So with that, where you start when you're doing a bond issue is to look to what the total property value is inside of the city. So inside of Durant, and this is the net assessed valuation, so basically take the market value, multiply it by 11%, and you come up with that $116 million. So your real property, $93 million, personal, $17, and then public service, $5. So that's the total value of all the property inside the city of Durant at the net assessed valuation, the multiplied by 11%. So then this is a historic looking back to 1997. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but if you go down to the very bottom, is it? Oh, okay, right there. You got 6.5%. It's been your average growth rate, which is very, very good inside of Oklahoma. So for our projections, we've used 4%, which is conservative. And if it grows at 6.5%, the tax rates would be lower than what we projected. Or we could issue the bonds quicker. So then this is a breakdown of what I'd said earlier. We'd issue the bonds in series, so these would be the levy payments. Go over to the far right. Oops. Nope. Right here, or what the tax rates would be in each of the years. Holding it upside down, I think. So then this page is kind of a restatement of, am I doing that? No. What you've seen on the previous page, right there is the average. So our projected average is 10.4, which is a key part. So then these are the rates that are applied to the property tax. Jump to the last slide. And so this is the breakdown of the property tax. Once again, Tim kind of showed this, but in 2006, you can see school district got 60, city 0, Bryan County, I think 16.5, 12 for the VOTEC, so a total of 88. So you can jump down to 2017, you have 60.16 to the school district, 0 for the city, county 16.87, VOTEC 12.26, with a total levy of 89.29. So this is what's applied to the value of the property. So if you have a $100,000 house, you'd have a $1,000 exemption, which would get you a tax bill of $892.90. So we went into more detail than we normally do. Normally we'd just take the average. What I showed earlier is that 10.4. So 10.4 on 100, basically on a $100,000 house is going to be about $100 per year. And it's like 97 is what it works out to. But here we're actually showing the details of what it would be on every year. So what we're doing here is this would be no change from the previous year. In 2000 and let's say 21, it's at 1,015. So you'd be up $120 right there. But on average, if you average these all out, it ends up being $100 per year on a $100,000 house. The 10.4 mills, on a higher level, the 10.4 mills, Oklahoma City has for a long time, their MAPS programs, they've just targeted 15 mills. They've used that for a long time. They vote every 5 years or so. I mean, their last one's $1 billion something. Some of the other communities around Oklahoma City kind of follow suit. Moore's done that. Moore has an election in June, has about 6 propositions for different things. Some are overpasses over I-35, an underpass for the railroad tracks. But once they kind of got a track record and got a consistent levy, they've kind of followed suit at that 15 mills. City of Nichols Hills operates at almost 30 mills. That's because they don't have any sales tax. I've talked about this before in some previous meetings. Nichols Hills is an affluent community, but everything and all the shopping around Nichols Hills all falls in Oklahoma City, so they don't get any sales tax revenue. So, you know, many, I'd say even decades ago, they realized if they ever wanted to get their streets fixed, they were going to have to find another way to do it, and so they implemented a property tax levy, and they've been doing that decade after decade. So on a real high level, I feel like I'm forgetting some things, so maybe Tim will have some questions. When my back's to you guys, I'm looking up here, I get a little lost on some of the things I might have wanted to say, but on a high level, that's the bonds, you know, GO Bonds 101. So happy to answer any questions. Sure, Curtis. So Curtis sent me an email because a question had come up at the previous meeting. I don't think it shows it here, but I'd had some rates that were 2.5%, and somebody said, well, what'll happen if rates go up? So Curtis asked if we did a rate shock of 200 basis points, what would happen, which means we'd basically be issuing bonds at 4.5% instead of 2.5%, and it came out to about 1 mil. So instead of being at 10.4, we'd be at about 11.6, I think is what I put in that email. Once again, probably what would happen is one, we use 4% on the growth rate instead of 6.5%. So if we end up averaging 6.5%, I ran that too, it actually more than offsets that 1 mil. The tax rate would be more like 9%, even if we issued at the higher interest rate with a 6% growth rate, that more than offsets, and the tax would be lower than a watch. So there's a lot of variables when we do these known variables that change each year, and that's why we come back each year, recalculate, get reauthorization, and issue these over a series of years. So, good question. Any other questions?
You're assuming that there are no increases in property valuations. I'm getting the impression that
No.
every so often that the county will reassess properties.
No, I assumed on the very first slide, I assumed that actually properties will be go up at an average of growth rate. Property value increases of 4%. Historically, has been 6.5%, but in this, I do assume a growth rate of 4%. So if it was lower,
Over the 15-year period or over a shorter period?
over the life of the bonds, yes, so 15 years.
The reason I bring these up is many of our citizens have homes that are in the Silo School District. They just got hit with a 15% sales tax increase,
And if this goes through, they're gonna have a 25% sales tax increase. I mean, not sales tax, but property tax increase. And then, assuming that there are no changes over that time period, that could possibly creep up to even 30%. We've got a lot of commercial property in town that right now is unoccupied because the Choctaw is pulled out, so you're gonna put a lot of commercial people at a somewhat of a disadvantage.
And Charlie, that's a great question. Somebody else brought that up as far as being in the Silo School District. Even with the new bond that passed, your property taxes are still going to be below what they are here in Durant, where the school district goes. Because I believe right now he'd show it's about a 60, what was it, about 60 mil? Yeah, right now you're at about a 60 mil for your school district.
That's Durant.
Yeah, for the Durant School District. You live in Silo School District? Right now, I think with the new bond, it's right around 55. So you're still, even though Silo passed the school district or passed the bond issue, you're still below what the folks in the Durant School District are paying. So, and I understand there's going to be an increase, but you're still below what the rest of the citizens here in Durant are paying with the Durant School District. So, Curtis, you had a question?
Just one comment, in fact, that of that
You got it.
4% that you're increasing property value, there's a lot of that. A lot of that increase comes from new homes and new construction. It's not being reassessed. That's just new construction and new properties.
Some of that is factored into it. I mean, we've got a lot of houses being built right now. And one of the things I asked Chris also to do is to be conservative with the numbers because, you know, there's always this assumption that we're going to just sustain this growth that we're kind of an anomaly here in Durant as far as the rest of the state goes. And we've got some really strong growth. We have problems that a lot of cities would like to have is with bringing more residents in and those type of things. But unfortunately, like as I showed you earlier, we had a developer come in. He's building those houses, I think, off of Mockingbird. And he looked at the city council and said, you know, the great thing is as soon as we get these houses built, you'll start getting your property taxes. And all of us just kind of looked at him and shook our head and said, no, we're not. He's out of Dallas. He just assumed that we were going to get a share of the property taxes here. And we all shook our heads and said, no, we're not going to get any of that. So that's the kind of, like I said, the things that we're trying to go out, educate the public as far as where your monies go and those. Yes, sir.
I have two questions about the total number of taxes that are going to be levied and collected. So at the peak bond issuance, when we have all four of the issuances in play at the first time, what do we anticipate that's going to be the total collections needed for that debt service?
So, I don't know if you can hear me, but you go to where your highest one year would be 18.54 mils. I don't know if you guys can hear me. So the total levy would be $2,740,116.
Could you? That's for that. That's an annual number. 2 million.
$2,740,116. That would be the levy on the highest year.
Okay. And then one more question. What is the average of those, like your average number you're looking to anticipate each year?
That's the 10.4 right there.
So 10 point.
Yeah.
So what's that? I mean, how much is that per year needed for the average debt service?
We got a total of $16,006,794. $16,006,794. So you divide that by the number of years, and that gets you your answer.
But okay.
On an average, you're looking at.
So call it. If it's 15 years and it's 16 million, it's about a million, like a million, a little under 1.1.
Okay.
But on average, you're looking at the fastest. And as a city manager in Oklahoma, I had to kind of wrap my head around this too because we don't get involved in property taxes. So the fastest way for me to realize what this actually means, when he says an average of 10.4 mil on a $100,000 house, it's about $104, give or take a few bucks when you average it over the span of the 15 years. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. So,
okay.
Does anybody else have any other questions? We were trying to not bore our listeners at home or our viewers at home too, trying to keep it at right about an hour. But does anybody else have any other questions in regards to this? Yes, JJ.
Like I said,
Got a mic?
I really appreciate the effort you guys are going. I love the details on this. So one of the questions I had, Tim, is just related to the 400 to 500 blocks. I know it's still out in the future. My question is, looking at the past budgets, you know, we've had an allocated amount of about $60,000, something like that, for materials. What is your, and again, separated from the project itself, what's your anticipated increase to material needs for the on years to maintain all these streets?
Well, that's a great question, and I think once, if you just take, like you said, we've been allocating a whopping $60,000. We're going to be allocating over $6 million over that span of this time. So that tells you right there, it's going to be quite a bit of a huge difference. Now, we've talked about, in order to make it a little bit more efficient, there's some companies out there, as you know, that can come out. When you do a mill and overlay, a big part of the project is a lot of the mill and getting that all done. We can have a company come in and utilize and do the mill work for us, or vice versa, to make it a little bit quicker of a job and not inconvenience our citizens as much as we can. But the material is going to be utilized. I mean, that $6 million can only be utilized for either the materials or the things that need to be done as far as those projects. So that's a great question. Yes?
One more question. On this project as a whole, we were talking about projected growth for the town. I guess that's talking about new homes, new population coming in. Do you anticipate that this bond proposal is going to be robust enough to handle that increased congestion in roads?
That's a great question too. I mean, we are looking at, like I said, considerable growth, and what we're experiencing right now is kind of a phenomenon here in Oklahoma. I do see it, you know, at a certain time that, you know, on down the road, we're going to have to look at, you know, some other things. Again, as Chris said, this is all kind of foreign to Durant. It's kind of foreign to a lot of cities here. But if you look at some of the cities that have experienced some really good growth, City of Norman, they go out every 5 years and they pass a bond for about $25 million, comes right back into the streets. That's all it goes toward, is streets. So if you ever go to Norman anytime, you're always wondering, why in the heck is it always torn up? Every time I go to Norman, they've got a street torn up. It's because they have a bond project, and it's the continuing growth, and it's keeping up with that. So, any other? Yes, ma'am. Byron. This reminds me of the old Phil Donahue show.
Okay, so if the sunset date, if we don't remove that, then we're left with a debt of
12.4 million.
Okay, so I thought, my understanding was that when we take out some type of a bond, the debt service paid, it's calculated so that at the end of that time, the debt is actually closer to zero than this would be.
Yeah.
So if you look at all of our others that are dedicated, and those are going to end at some time, are we going to still have debt on what Southeastern receives, what the Durant Multisports, when those end, are we still going to owe on those
Those are
facilities?
required to be paid off, and those will be paid off.
Those will be paid off,
Yes,
but
ma'am.
this wasn't.
No, there are certain loans that were taken out against the 1 penny, and there were certain loans that were not. They were taken out as just a loan as far as the, whether it was the authority on those type of revenue bonds. So, I mean, let me back up. Yep, we still have, like I said, overall for about the next 6 years, we're going to be averaging close past the 2021, about close to $1.8, $1.9 million a year in debt service still that's going to be out there.
So if it's removed, that allows that debt to continue to be paid out of that source?
Out of the general fund. It'll have to come straight out of the general fund. But here's the good news. If the sunset is removed, or later on down, if it's extended, that takes, right now creates about 3.2 million or so. I have to look back at my figures. That debt, like I said, will be down to about a $2 million a year bond or loan payment, debt service payment. So that will leave some left over to help offset some of the other infrastructure needs that we have. That money has to be used against the infrastructure. So, I mean, used for infrastructure, it cannot be utilized for anything else.
Okay, but do the citizens have a guarantee that that debt will be paid from
Yes,
that money?
yes, we have to pay it. There's no, there's no getting around it. We have debt service and we're required to pay it.
And can loans still be made against it?
If it sunsets? No,
Yes.
if it sunsets, no.
Okay.
No more loans. Yes. Keep thinking.
This may seem like a very simple
it's
question,
good.
but in the past, a lot of propositions that have been put forth, because of the legal language in which they're written, if you were in favor of something, you had to vote no, or if you were against something, you voted yes. It's very confusing a lot of
Yes, it
times
is.
with the legal way it's worded.
Sure.
So I just want to clarify, for these two particular propositions, if you're for it, you vote yes, and if you're against it, you vote no.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because it's not always been that way in the past, so I
Oh,
wanted
no,
to clarify.
I agree with you. You're like, did I just vote for something I'm against?
Yes.
I understand. No,
And
no.
recently, there was some information that came out in our city
Mm-hmm.
that stated if you were for it, vote against, vote no, and I thought, I'm going to go clarify, so.
No, it's a good question. Now, if you want to remove the sunset and continue the capital improvement program, you vote yes. If you want to pass the bond issue, you vote yes.
Okay.
So, very
Thank
simple.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mayor, do you have any closing comments, or you ready to wrap this up?
Well, I would just again thank all of you for being here, and some great questions, really. I think we've been provided, hopefully, maybe the information some of you were looking for and are hoping for, but I think Tim's done a great job. Chris, thank you. I do think we missed Brandon, our engineer, can enlighten you a lot on what I was going to, the in-depth work that's going to be done. These are major overhauls, reconstruction, I think is how they're referred to, and underground drainage to get the water that Main Street deals with every time that we get a tenth of an inch. But June the 19th would be the day to maybe Brandon will be able to make that one.
Yes, he will be. And if you have any friends or neighbors, a couple questions I got to ask. This bond, you have to live within the city limits. If you live across the street, you're not eligible to vote for this, and it'll be. And so, if you have neighbors that you or others that need some information, we have other flyers here available. If you want to take some with you, feel free to pass that out. But that's the purpose of this meeting, and the mayor made a good point. The purpose of this is to educate our public as far as what we're proposing here. So, and do you have any other?
Well, and just in closing, and Tim really just alluded to it, but he mentioned going back as far as 2001, transportation issues and streets and street infrastructure have been looked at multiple times. The funding source for that, we never thought passed really the sales tax revenue and supplementing some with the DCUA, Utilities Authority monies and so forth. But here is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity provided by our state legislators with the ad valorem property tax possibilities to help fund the city's needs. And you heard Tim mention again several communities that are doing this as we speak. And so this came to council presented by the city manager and his staff, and council felt it was probably the best option on the table. And so we supported the recommendation to bring it before the citizens to vote on. And that's the American way. And again, thank you all for being here. Tim, great presentation.
Thank you.
Are we done?
We're done.
Okay. You're dismissed. Sounds like a teacher, doesn't it?